Good afternoon. Welcome to everybody. This is the monthly meeting of the Integrated Reporting U.S. Community. And we're really excited today to have two guests, Mary Barth and Elmar who are going to share some research that they've done on integrated reporting.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you for the introduction and for the opportunity to present our research to your community. I would just like to say at the start, we currently have a thunderstorm here in Pretoria, so if you hear any loud noises, it's not my stomach growling, it's just the thunder and the rain in the background, so I'll try to ignore that. So the title of our research project is The Economic Consequences Associated with Integrated Report Quality, Capital Market and Real Effects. The study was published towards the end of last year in a journal called Accounting, Organizations and Society. And I've co-authored this study with Mary Barth, who is on this webinar today, and then our two colleagues from Auckland, Stephen Kayan and Lee Chen. So let me jump right in with the question that interests us in this study, and that is, does high quality integrated reporting facilitate investor and management understanding which manifest in economic benefits to the firm? So when one looks at the International Integrated Reporting Council's framework, it has a dual objective, and that is to provide information to external providers of capital to assist them in their resource allocation decisions. But it also has as an objective to facilitate integrated thinking within a firm and hopefully to have an effect on managers and boards' decision-making. And so this really motivates our study. This slide just provides some background on integrated reporting. I'm sure that many of the participants on this webinar is familiar with the concepts, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, I'm just quickly going to run through that. So the International Integrated Reporting Council's framework is principles-based. There's no standard format for what an integrated report should look like. Instead, the framework highlights 7 guiding principles and content and 8 content elements, which really just provide some basic kind of context of what the council expects in an integrated report. This relates to 6 capitals. And these capitals are typically broader than what one would expect in a traditional financial report. And it relates to the value creation processes of an entity. So really the integrated report is intended to communicate how a firm creates value over time. So as I've mentioned, the scope is broader than a typical financial report. So a financial report focuses a lot on financial capital, and it only partially addresses the remaining 5 of the 6 capitals. Another key distinguishing feature of an integrated report relates to the second guiding principle, which is the connectivity of information. And so what the council expects is that the financial and non-financial information relating to these 6 capitals should really talk to each other. And they should tell a story of how the firm creates value across these 6 capitals. And underpinning all of this is the concept of integrated thinking. So the council believes that if some of the internal silos are broken down and there's an improved understanding of how value is created across a firm, that this will result in better internal decision-making and also higher quality information that is communicated to the external providers of capital. And it's really this dual objective that we empirically assess in this research project. So the setting of our study is in South Africa. We use South African firms and South African data. And integrated reporting has been mandatory in South Africa since March 2010. So all firms with a primary listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange is required to issue an integrated report. In terms of the JSE listings requirements read together with the King Code on corporate governance, the rule is on an apply or explain basis. Now, what this really means is that disclosure about integrated reporting is mandatory for firms listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, but they can decide how they want to implement this specific principle. They can either issue an integrated report or do it by some other means. But what we find is in 2014, we hand collected all the reports of the firms listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And we find that almost 98% of the firms self-declare their reports as integrated reports. So it's a very high compliance rate. There are a few firms that explain why they do not issue an integrated report, and that would take the compliance rate beyond 99%. So we really have a mandatory setting here where we can investigate a fairly large number of firms. Now, prior to the International Integrated Reporting Council's framework being issued in December 2013, South Africa had its own guidance on integrated reporting, but they adopted the Council's framework in 2014 and ceased its kind of own guidance. So that's kind of the background of the firms and the regulatory setting that we use. Mary, do you want to add anything just on the South African setting?
Yeah, I think it's important for the non-researchers on the call. It's really lovely that we have a mandatory setting to work with, because researchers always have to worry about, if you have something that's voluntary for firms, why are they doing it? And so you'd have two groups of firms: voluntary reporters and firms that do not report. And from a research design perspective, it's just much cleaner to say everybody has to do it, and therefore we don't have to worry about what's lurking in the background, that something that the voluntary reporters have in common that differs from those who don't report, that would confound the inferences that we make. So the fact that we have a setting where it is mandatory, that takes that off the table. There's no self-selection, as we refer to it, and we don't have to worry about what might be going on in the background. So it makes it, in the end of the day, it makes us much more confidence in the inferences that we draw, which is why we take advantage of this situation.
Thanks. So looking at our research questions, we're interested in whether integrated reporting is associated with greater firm value, but more specifically, we are interested in which components of firm value is affected by integrated report quality. So we decompose firm value into stock liquidity, so whether the shares is more liquid, expected future cash flows, and cost of capital. So if we think of firm value as essentially being discounted future cash flows, we look at those components specifically. Now, as researchers, it's quite challenging because many of these concepts that we are interested in are not directly observable, so we need proxies for them. And so our proxy for integrated report quality, we use the EY Excellence in Integrated Reporting Awards to construct our proxy for integrated report quality. I'll explain that in a bit more detail on the next slide. And then if we look at our proxies for firm value, stock liquidity, expected future cash flows, and cost of capital, we use Tobin's Q as our proxy for firm value. Now Tobin's Q really is just a ratio of the market value of assets to the book value of assets. So what we do here is we investigate whether integrated report quality is associated with the market value of assets beyond that what is already reported in the financial reports, which is the book value component. So that would mainly cover financial capital and some of the other 5 capitals. With regards to stock liquidity, we use the bid-ask spread as our proxy for liquidity. So the idea here is that if integrated report quality removes some of the information asymmetry, that we will see smaller bid-ask spreads. So it's kind of an inverse proxy for stock liquidity. For expected future cash flows, we use analyst target price forecasts. So we have data available where analysts forecast future share prices, and with share prices just being kind of expected future cash flows discounted, that represents our proxy of expectations of future cash flows. And then finally, cost of capital. Now, that is quite a tough one to measure. There's quite a big literature on how to measure cost of capital, and all of these different measures come with some kind of measurement error. So we take 4 proxies of cost of capital that's frequently used in the accounting and finance literature, and we average those to hopefully get rid of some of the measurement error. And then finally, we include some control variables in our model. So we control for whether a firm's CSR performance, so how good are they at corporate social responsibility, whether they issue a standalone CSR report, corporate governance, accounting quality, etc. So what's important is when you read our research is that what we really document is link 4. Is the association between these kind of EY scores and our proxies for our various economic outcomes. And the extent to which we can infer something about link 1, which is really what we're interested in, depends on the strength and the kind of the strength of the research design relating to links 2, 3, and 5. Mary, you want to add something on the research design?
I think maybe just a comment on the control variables, again, for the non-researchers in the audience. Our objective is to try to figure out whether IRQ, integrated report quality, is associated with these firm value effects, bid-ask spread, target price forecast, and the cost of capital measures. So we want to make sure that we control for other things that have been shown to be associated with, both with the left-hand, what we call the left-hand side, the bid-ask spread, target price forecast, and the cost of capital, that have nothing to do with integrated report quality. So we rely on prior research for some controls there. And then we also want to make sure that we have controls for things that are maybe correlated with integrated report quality, that are things like CSR performance, and whether a firm issues a CSR report, and how good is their disclosure in general. So maybe a firm is just really good at communicating their results in press releases and annual reports and whatever. We want to control for that and say just because those are the same firms that have a higher quality integrated report doesn't necessarily mean that it's the integrated report per se that is what's going on. So we want the control variables we as researchers think the control variables are very important. There's a long list of them. And one of the things that gets beaten into us in the review process is everybody comes up with their own idea of what we should be controlling for if we want to make the inferences that we want to make. So they play a very important role, and there's a long list, but they cover various things. We also control for year, so things may change year by year. And for industries, there may be differences across industry, all those sorts of things. But the short version is they really help us, again, add confidence to our inferences that what we're seeing is the incremental effect of our integrated report quality over and above all the rest of these things.
Thanks, Mary. All right, so let me explain a bit more our proxy for integrated report quality, which I think is very important in this study. So annually since 2011, EY in South Africa releases these integrated reporting quality awards. So they evaluate the top 100 firms listed on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. They evaluate the integrated reports, and they publicly announce these kind of quality buckets. So firms could either be top 10, excellent, good, average, or need improvement. So it's kind of 5 quality buckets. The assessment of these reports are done by 3 professors from the University of Cape Town. And they stayed the same throughout our sample period. So we have the same set of adjudicators that have evaluated these reports across time. And they have extensive experience in reading these reports. And we're really grateful towards EY and both EY and the University of Cape Town for making this data available to us. Mary, you want to add anything?
Well, I think the fact that we have these scores from E&Y is important to our study. There are many benefits of using these external measures. Other studies, the authors themselves go through and create indices, and that's fine. But when you look at the availability of these scores, as Elmar said, these people have been doing this for a long time. They're independent. They work at the University of Cape Town. They're not Ernst & Young or EY employees. And they have been doing this for years. They are able to spend a half an hour to 4 hours per report trying to analyze it. And together they have more than 50 years experience in evaluating corporate reports. They're also particularly knowledgeable about integrated reporting. One individual is on the board of directors of the Global Reporting Initiative and was a member of South Africa's Integrated Reporting Working Group. Another teaches integrated reporting at the university, a whole course in it. So I think Elmar and I both think that these people know more about integrated reports than we do. They've read a lot more of them. They're in a better position to assess the quality. And so that's a huge benefit to us. But again, it's all about trying to get confidence in our inferences. And the other added benefit is they not only shared with us, of course, the publicly available quality scores that are the basis for the awards they give, but they also shared with us their internal score sheets. So we have item by item how they scored various reports on really along the dimensions that are identified in the integrated report framework. And that allows us to kind of dig a bit deeper and say, where is this quality coming from? What is it that that is making the difference in the relations that we test?
Thanks, Mary. Right, so just looking at our sample, so we have 4 years of data in our study from 2011 through 2014. And although EY annually evaluates the top 100 firms in terms of market capitalization, we included in our study the 80 firms evaluated by EY across all 4 years in our sample. The reason for that is we also run our models in a changes form, as you will see briefly. And so we don't really want changes in integrated report quality to be affected by firms moving in and out of the top 100 samples. So what we really look at is changes in quality and not changes in some other kind of factor. So as Mary mentioned, we also have access to the detailed score sheets and the detailed underlying data that makes up these EY rankings. So what we work with in the study is not the publicly available quality categories, but we actually kind of compute a score from the underlying data, which is a bit richer than what is publicly available. So what we are able to do is not only have a proxy for integrated report quality, but to kind of break that down into more components so that we can see kind of what aspect it is of integrated reporting that may be driving our results. So on the left-hand side of the slide, I just copied again the guiding principles and the content elements as contained in the integrated reporting framework. And we are able to come up with 12 components of our integrated reporting score from the EY data. So most of those map directly from the integrated reporting framework. So for example, you can see connectivity of information, stakeholder relationships, materiality, conciseness, etc. kind of just repeat in that format in our components. And then we have to combine 3 of the framework principles and elements into one component. So strategic focus and future orientation, strategy and resource allocation outlook. We collapsed all of those into one component, strategic focus and future orientation. And then reliability and completeness and consistency and comparability. Those 2 are combined into our final category, which is just other, which is kind of items within the EY score sheet that we're not able to identify consistently across all 4 years and create a separate component. And so we run our analysis with the main IRQ proxy, but also separately with all 12 of these components to kind of see where the results come from. Right, so what I'm going to show you next is a table from our paper which represents the findings for firm value using our proxy Tobin skew. And what you will see in this table, it looks looks kind of intimidating, but I'll try and break it down for you. So we have two models on this table. So the first one is just what we call levels. So here, Tobin's Q is our left-hand side variable, or the outcome that we're interested in. And then we have our main proxy, integrated report quality, and then all the control variables that we spoke about. The second panel represents the changes model. So it's exactly the same model, but we just kind of run it in changes. So the dependent variable is changes in Tobin's Q. Our variable of interest here is changes in IRQ, and then we have the changes in the control variables. And so what you really would like to focus on is our variable of interest here, integrated report quality. And what you can see is that there's a positive association between integrated report quality and Tobin's Q, which is statistically significant. And so what this coefficient means is our integrated report quality variable is a percentile rank. So it ranges from 0 to 1 each year. And so it basically says that for a firm moving from kind of the lowest integrated reporting quality to the highest integrated reporting quality, that is associated with a 0.35 increase in Tobin's Q, which is roughly a 24% of kind of the median Tobin's Q, which I think, you know, economically is also significant. And we kind of get similar results when we run this in changes. We also find a positive association between integrated report quality, changes in integrated report quality, and changes in Tobin's Q. Mary, you want to add something on this table?
Just maybe a comment about the difference between the levels and the changes and why we do changes. First of all, change here means year over year. So that's one reason, as Elmar mentioned, we have the same firms in the sample, so we can take 1 year and then see whether IRQ increased or decreased, and at the same time, did Tobin's Q increase or decrease over the course of a year. And this is, again, another research design issue that says researchers worry that there's something missing from this equation, despite the fact that we've tried really hard to put as many control variables as we can. And by taking differences, you almost use the firm as its own control. And by subtracting 1 year from the other, anything that's the same from year to year will drop out. And therefore, again, you're much more confident in the inference, because at the same time IRQ changes, Tobin's Q changes. And that's a stronger inference than if the level happens to be the same as level. Because many things are correlated in levels, but many, many fewer are correlated in changes. But that's the year-over-year thing is one reason why the sample size drops from 192 to 212, because we lose a year, if you will, from the base year when we start. But that's why we do first differences. And usually first differences are weaker results because you're subtracting, but in our case, not much weaker.
Right. If we look at the results for the components, so this table is kind of reduced content, so we don't include all the control variables again, but they are there in the background. So we've run these models with the control variables too. And so not surprisingly, you can see that many of the components show up significant. Maybe just point out a few here. So you can see the coefficient for materiality. So these are our top 12 components. So strategic focus and future orientation, connectivity, stakeholder relationship, materiality, etc. So you can see materiality is highly significant. The coefficient is also larger than what we reported for kind of the overall IRQ score. But so many of the other components, right? So conciseness, connectivity, strategic focus, and future orientation. So many of the components also show up statistically in the separate analysis. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all the tables in our paper, but many of them follow this same kind of format. So in the remainder of the presentation, I'm really just going to focus on kind of the main inferences we make from our study. All right, so we've already talked about the positive association between IRQ and Tobin's Q. When we look at the components of firm value, we find a negative association between IRQ and bid-ask spread, right? So as integrated reporting quality increases, we have a smaller spread, which suggests less information asymmetry, more liquidity. And we refer to this as a capital market effect of integrated reporting. So bid-ask spread is something solely determined by the capital market. With regards to expected future cash flows, we find a positive association between integrated report quality and expected future cash flows. So once again, as the quality goes up, firms tend to have higher expectations of future cash flows as measured by the analyst target price forecast. Now, this could be due to two possible reasons. So it could be a capital market effect, in the sense that the users of the integrated reports are able to estimate future cash flows more accurately. Or it could be the internal decision-making story, in that as management prepares the integrated report and they apply integrated thinking, that's thunder if you hear that in the background. And as management kind of apply integrated thinking, they make better decisions, which leads to higher expectations of future cash flow. So at this stage, we're not really sure whether this is a capital market or a real effect. And then finally, we find no association between integrated report quality and cost of capital, which is a capital market consequence. But it seems that the main effect on firm value results from the higher liquidity and the higher expectation for future cash flows. So in additional tests, we try and probe this expected future cash flows channel a bit more to determine whether it is the capital market effect and or the real effect. It could be both. So what we do here is we firstly examine whether analysts actually estimate future share prices more accurately. So that would be an indication of a capital market effect. But we find no association between integrated report quality and analyst target price forecast accuracy. So it suggests that it's not really coming from the capital market side. So we go into more detail on the real effect. And what we do find is that firms with higher integrated report quality subsequently have higher realized operating cash flows, both 1 year ahead, 2 year ahead, and the sum of operating cash flows for 1 year and 2 year ahead. So this suggests that management is really making some decisions which results in higher exposed cash flows after the integrated reporting process. And so we kind of dig a little bit deeper, and we look at one specific decision that management makes, which is investments. And we do find that firms with higher integrated reporting quality have better investment efficiency. So relative to firms within the same industry, they make more efficient investment decisions. So with regards to the 12 components, and this is just really kind of a summary across all the models that we ran, we find that the components 2 to 5 are really the main drivers of the results. So that is connectivity of information, stakeholder relationships, materiality, and conciseness. And I think it's quite noteworthy that the connectivity of information, which is really one of the kind of key principles of integrated reporting, shows up in all of our models as a main driver of our results. So just in concluding the presentation side, before we go over to questions and answers, so what we find overall is a positive association between integrated reporting and liquidity. So that would be a capital market effect. A positive association between quality and expected future cash flows, which is not from the capital market side. So the users of financial statements do not seem to make more accurate forecasts of future cash flows. But we do find a positive association with exposed realized operating cash flows and investment efficiency, which supports the idea that management is making better decisions that has some cash flow implications. So overall, our evidence is consistent with the dual objective of integrated reporting, of improving information quality to the external providers of capital and promoting integrated thinking. So thank you. That ends the kind of formal presentation. All right.
So
we can go over to questions and answers now.
Great. Why don't you, Elmar, I think maybe if you want to stop sharing your screen and we can,
sure.
We'll all see kind of everybody's faces, or at least the ones that are sharing. Hi, Elizabeth. Anybody that's cares to, please feel free to share your screen, and you can jump right in and ask a question by unmuting yourselves, or you can also ask a question through the chat window if you'd rather. But please feel free to unmute. You just put your cursor in the lower left-hand corner, and you can unmute yourself. So while we're waiting for people, Bob, I don't know if you want to jump in. I know you're the one who first made the connection with Mary Barth at Stanford, and I think this was a great, thank you so much. Very, very informative and helpful.
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much for Mary and Elmar to do the presentation. I think more importantly is doing the research in this area. And what really caught my eye, being involved in integrated reporting, is the real effects channel that you refer to, and the investment efficiency, and then breaking that down using the E&Y study and assessing that, you know, to connectivity, stakeholder relationships, materiality, and conciseness. And one of the arguments one of the strategies we've been trying to do in integrated reporting is real basic, is maybe there's a demand pull, an investor kind of demand for integrated reporting. But what's really important to me, coming from a company background, is what I call the supply push. Being in financial reporting, I always try to argue to people within companies that maybe you can do something with your financial reporting that is actually a benefit to the company, instead of thinking the opposite. And I think this goes a long way in that. I'm not. You talked a lot about it. I'm not sure if you can talk any more about this real effect and those aspects of the guiding principles. I think connectivity is obvious. It's really, I think, our big argument in integrated reporting, that is, if you go to the multi-capital approach and think about those capitals and then think about connectivity, you really hit the sweet spot of what we're after, and the other stakeholder relationship, materiality, and conciseness are all kind of related to that. So I'm not sure if I really have a question or more you can say. Maybe it's another question I had is, would you suggest other type of research in this area of these real effects? Because I think that is a really powerful, proved or disproved, powerful kind of way to think about what we're trying to do in integrated reporting, and help support it, or maybe argue against it. So I'll just open it with that, with kind of an open-ended question.
Okay, let me say a few things about the real effect channel. This was something that intrigued me because I've spent, as you know, Bob, I've spent a lot of time in financial reporting, and financial reporting doesn't aim to do this. They may do it on the side. I'm sure the information is helpful to lots of folks, but that's not the main purpose. And therefore, there's really not a lot of data out there about how financial reporting affects real decision making, or to do anything with. One of the things that intrigued me about this project when I wanted to get involved was exactly what you said. There's a lot more to a firm than its financial capital, and it would be very interesting to find out how reporting about that works for the capital markets, but also for internal decision making. And so the fact that we had the E&Y data, that's what really allowed us to dig deeper into this to try to figure out what was going on. But I think also because integrated reporting has a goal to do this, we want to know whether it achieved its goal, and that motivated the question in the first place. Whether there's more work to be done here, there is more work to be done. The question is, how to be clever about getting data about which kind of real decisions. You know, as you know, for a researcher like us from the outside to get inside a company to try to figure out what's influencing their decisions it's very difficult. And so here we had some scores about reporting that had to do potentially with real effects of connectivity and conciseness and some of these other things that we hope comes through in integrated reports, and that allowed us to kind of dig into this. So we'd love to do it. I don't know whether Elmar has any further thoughts on this question, but if anybody's got any other ideas, we'd be interested in doing such research.
Yeah, I think, as Mary says, the problem is data. I mean, managers' decisions are not observable, directly observable. So we need to infer it from data, which is really hard, and to do that for a large number of firms at the same time. But I think the integrated reporting kind of academic research is developing at a fast pace. I think there are quite a number of researchers working in this area currently, which is good news. Some of the ideas that we're still interested in is just how much extra information does integrated reporting communicate over and above what's in financial reports. So we're currently working on a study looking at kind of integrated reporting and you know, what we call stock price synchronicity. So the idea is that you know, if a firm's stock price move a lot with the market, there's not a lot of firm specific information. So one idea is to just really look at where the kind of integrated reporting kind of breaks the movement and the association with stock market prices. The real effects channel is really tough. I think that's what we want to get at. That it really is the interesting part. But coming up with proxies to measure real effects is challenging. There is a research area, and we're kind of probing this currently. Looking at kind of what's called real earnings management. But even in that literature, it's quite hard to say that whether that is really kind of bad decisions or good decisions, because, you know, you kind of need to look ex post at the consequences of those decisions.
I guess just one added comment is, given your interest, and I think a lot of people's interest in this area and the real effects of this reporting, maybe it'll motivate us to think a little bit harder how we can take some of the things we're currently thinking about working on and nudge them in that direction to speak to that. It's just the good news and the bad news is this is all new. So even the capital markets side is relatively new, and that's interesting to researchers. So we tend to go there first because the data are more readily available. But I hear you, and I think we'll try to, maybe we can dig a little bit deeper on that side ourselves, so we can encourage other people to come up with some good ideas.
Great. So while you've been talking, we have a ton of activity on our little chat window. So I'm going to take the questions from the beginning, if I may. So the first question you can probably see on your screen. Can you talk a little bit more about how specifically quality is assessed? You mentioned connectivity of information is an indicator of quality. Do you find there are ways to disclose connectivity that are considered higher quality than other, that disclose that connectivity that are considered higher quality than others? So this issue of connectivity.
Well, I guess the notion of quality in our paper is how it comes from the University of Cape Town assessors, and what they're doing is they're trying to figure out how well the company is achieving what's in the framework. And they know the connectivity is part of what's in the framework, and that's what these reports should be heading towards. So we don't have a quality measure kind of independent of everything, you know, our assessment of quality. This is the framework sets out what should be in there, and these Cape Town professors are trying to figure out the extent that it is there, and therefore their scoring system is against the framework principles and elements, and they read it and try to figure out how well the company is achieving those goals. And they tell us, they said, you know, if it's just a lot of pictures and it's a lot of fluff, or it's too long and you get lost in the detail, that's not high quality. So that's why they're looking for conciseness. They're looking for a report that really helps people understand what's going on, conditional on what they've been asked to do, which is comply with the framework. So that is the benchmark. And the connectivity and conciseness and stakeholder relationships, all of that comes from these professors' interpretations of what the framework wants them to talk about. You know, how well they're doing that.
It's a really interesting thing that we all think so much about the importance of data, but that actually the root of this quality metric is just very informed people taking a very careful read of these reports, and it's hard to be more objective than that, really, that it's such a complex thing, right?
Well, that's right. And I think these people also told us that this is not a tick the box exercise. They don't go through and say, is this there? Is that there? Is that there? Okay, good, high quality. Yeah. That's not what they're trying to do. And from a researcher's point of view, we would be more in that position, not being quite as expert in analyzing these reports and be able to do it with the expert judgment that they can apply in this particular area. We would be more saying, okay, did they talk about how the capitals relate together, not really being in an expert position to judge how well they did that, which is why I said in the beginning, we're so fortunate to have an expert developed notion of quality as opposed to just ticking the box, because they say they don't want to tick the box because that's not achieving the objective of the integrated report. And because every company is different in terms of how these things relate and what they should be talking about, it is quite difficult to come up with some really objective measure of how a bunch of different companies compare to each other in the way they do this.
Fascinating, really interesting. Let's jump. Sorry,
I think Elmar wanted to say
something. You have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to add 2 points to that. So prior to the EY Excellence in Integrated Reporting Awards, EY also had the Excellence in Corporate Reporting Awards in South Africa, and that ran for many years. So that was replaced by the Integrated Reporting Awards. And these same professors evaluated those corporate reporting awards in the pre-IR period. So I think what's really useful is that they also know these firms very well. I mean, the top 100, although there's movement, I mean, they largely stay the same, but they're very familiar with these firms over the year. And so to evaluate how the firms are reporting that they know well, in terms of the integrated reporting framework, I think is useful in our context. And then just the second point is, as researchers, we would like to come up with a proxy for integrated reporting quality that we can apply easily across a large set of firms. Now, in financial reporting, we have some proxies in the literature for that, where you can kind of run models on a large scale data and come up with accounting quality. But for integrated reporting, we're not there yet. And I think the problem is that to measure this how integrated the report is, how connected the information is, we cannot do that computer-based yet. Maybe we come up with some artificial intelligence or coding where we can get large-scale data, but currently this is an human-intensive process to come up with these proxies. So that's why we're very grateful towards EY and the University of Cape Town for this.
Yeah, I mean, for the movement overall, it's an incredible thing that exists, because otherwise if we were waiting for the US, for example, it's going to take forever to get there. So great. Let's jump to the next question. I understand that the Big Four accounting firms have been sponsors of SASB, and they see sustainability reporting as a business opportunity. How has the evidence submitted here been shared with them to get more uptake of integrated reporting?
As researchers, we put our research out there, and we presented in many places. We presented at conferences, but we're not. And you've given us the opportunity to put it out to even more people by this webinar. We appreciate that. But have we sent it to people at the Big Four who are doing? No. I guess we hope that if they have an interest in the area, they will seek it out. I mean, whoever wrote the question, please feel free to send it to them if you think they would be interested.
Good. Thank you. Next question. So will you be sending a link to the study? I think somebody already shared that on it. It's also on the event information on our website. Does the study outline who the 80 companies are? And are there other audit firms that review award excellence in integrated reporting?
We do not have a list in the study of the 80 firms. It's not because that's a secret. It's just that it's not typically done in a large sample study. You don't actually list out all of the observations. In this paper, it could have been done. It was only 80, but you can imagine if you do it on 3,000 firms, and if you do it for 80, you know, what number do you stop? But it's just not done as a practical matter. But I don't know. Elmar can say whether he thinks there'd be any problem sharing the list of those names. I think it's kind of public information if we,
well,
in some sense.
Study the quality awards are public, right?
Right. So every year EY releases kind of a PDF document which contains the name of the firms in the 5 categories. So literally we've just taken the 2011 to 2014 PDFs and we looked for the firms that stayed in the sample all 4 years. So it's publicly available information.
But in terms of other firms doing the same kind of awards, I'm not aware of it. Elmar, you're down closer to the stock exchange there. Other firms do it?
So we have, I think we have 2 other integrated reporting awards in South Africa. All of them have got slightly different objectives. I think from my perspective, I think the EY one is the most well-known one. I also know that EY has expanded these integrated reporting awards to other stock exchanges. I think they have one running in Singapore too. But that's more or less it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Bill Bowie, thank you for sharing the link with everybody. And I know you have a question down the way. We'll get to that in just a second. From Paul Thompson, a few observations. Evidence is key to persuade companies to use integrated reporting. So impact on firm value of adoption of integrated reporting is a question. Then interested in value of integrated reporting to SMEs. So the question 2, I think, is in your data, and then we can move to the question about SMEs. Can you see the list, Elmar and Mary?
Yeah. So we have not looked at the adoption of integrated report quality, integrated reports. There have been a couple of prior research studies that have looked at adoption of mandatory integrated reporting in South Africa, and they find that things like the relevance of earnings have increased after they have adopted the integrated report. But this is not a firm by firm thing. This is an overall, just like our study, an overall inference from the sample of firms, kind of before and after the reporting was mandatory. But a decrease in book value of equity. And then another study finds a positive association between Bloomberg's environmental, social, and governance scores and analyst earnings forecast accuracy for a sample of firms shortly after, from before to after. So there have been a few studies looking at the actual adoption of mandatory reporting that in 2011 or the year or two before and after, so comparing before and after, but that's not something we have looked at. And I don't know, Elmar, you want to add anything to that? Or the SME, they're only mandatory for the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So we don't, and small and medium-sized enterprises, usually those data are even more difficult to come up with, but they're not required to do these reports in the first place.
Got it. Let's see. Bill Bowie. Can this approach be applied to validation of correlation of real effects on the non-financial capitals for example, correlation to improvements in stocks, flows, sufficiency of capital, human and social capital, natural human and social capitals.
Oh.
I know. Talk about connectivity, right?
I want connectivity, and you know, immediately think about how do we. It's all, you know, for us, it's all about trying to get measures or data on these things, and natural, human, and social capitals are notoriously difficult to get a hold of. Right? We have a lot of information on financial capitals, hence the capital market effect that we focus on in our paper, and then investment efficiency. But I don't think we have data. I don't think our data are fine enough to look at the, for example, connectivity as it relates to one of the 6 capitals, because connectivity by its nature is connecting all of these things together. Mm-hmm. So I'm not quite sure how we would go about trying to. It's an interesting question, but I'm not quite sure how we would go about doing that. Elmar, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, it's very tough. I think we're getting some research ideas that I'm jotting down. But yeah, to get the data for these capitals, I mean, in many of the integrated reports, there's not a specific value to them, and I think in the type of research that we do, which is based on kind of quantitative analysis, we need values to work with. You know, we can code data and maybe work with categories, but I think these things are hard to measure in the type of research that we do. And maybe just linking up with some of the other questions on, you know, SME and maybe some of these points coming up, is we apply a very specific kind of research method, but it's open to researchers to apply other methods. For example, experimental research and looking specifically at SMEs, or you know, looking at a case study where the researcher will go into a specific firm and kind of do an in-depth analysis on that particular firm. But that's not really the research method that Mary and I work in. So we need kind of fairly large-scale data with numbers to be able to do our work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and all of that's why I think we were excited that Elmar and I are happy that a lot of researchers are starting to work in this area, and that not only brings a variety of cleverness to try to figure out how to do some of this stuff, but also different methodologies, which kind of we can triangulate from there.
Just if I could quickly, Mary Adams, the part of the reason why I asked, this is Bill Bowie, is that we at Reporting 3.0 are launching a collaboration with IIRC around multi-capitalism, and so this is the kind of research that we would be interested in including in that particular program that's still in its early phases. So I would love to touch base and you know, about integrating this line of research, but also connecting you know, with other researchers that you're aware of who might be looking at this interconnectivity and the cross-capital dynamics and effects. So thank you for your research.
Thank you for your comments.
Thanks, Bill. And yeah, I think we can talk more about that project at a future program. So it looks like we have another question, and then we have 5 minutes left in the hour. So how do you deal with the chicken and egg dilemma? Does a company with higher IRQ perform better, or does a company produce higher IRQ because it was a good performer overall? Would longer time series data help to cancel out this chicken and egg question?
This is a question with a lot of research that we do. Is we have a name for this. We call it endogeneity. So what's leading what? Because we're very careful in our study to talk about associations. One thing we look at, as I said when we did the presentation, we look at changes. That's helpful, but that's not the answer. We have a section in the back of our paper that talks about possible endogeneity issues, and some of the ones that are raised here are things that we think about, and some of them go against what we find. You know, if you'd expect, you know, firms to make changes to achieve a particular effect, then we say, are we observing that? Well, we would be observing the opposite, actually, if they were doing that. If they were making higher quality integrated reports to reduce cost of capital, then you'd expect the cost of capital to be lower after they did that than before. So anyways, we have a section in the back of the paper that talks about this, but it's a struggle for all empirical research in social sciences to try to feel good about it, but we don't say one thing causes another. We've been very careful about that, and this is the reason. Elmar, do you want to add anything to that?
So, with the few minutes we have left, I think it'd be helpful just to talk about where to now and where, what you two are working on, and, what we could expect maybe in the future for future lines of inquiry.
Elmar, do you want to talk about what we've been up to? He's been the locus of this in the last couple of weeks with.
Yeah,
it's early. I'll preface it by saying it's early days, so this is a cold call. But Lee Chen has been down in South Africa, and they've been working hard. I don't.
Yeah. So one of the co-authors on this paper, as Mary says, Lee Chen was in South Africa for the past 2 weeks, and we've really just been banging data, writing code, trying to come up with ideas and new projects. So I mentioned the idea of kind of stock price synchronicity. We're also investigating earnings management. And so what we try to do here is really see that if integrated reporting achieves its objective of getting management to focus on the longer term, kind of longer term prospects or longer term performance of the firm, then we would expect that they would be less inclined to manage short-term earnings. And so we're just starting out with that. And in the literature, we have the idea of accruals-based earnings management and real activities earnings management. So accruals are kind of less severe because they reverse over time, whereas real activities management, where managers really kind of, change activities to meet earnings objectives. So this has got a longer term effect and could be detrimental to future performance. So we're going down that avenue. We don't really have any preliminary results or anything to talk about. But those are kind of the main areas we're focusing on now. I mean, there's just a bunch of other ideas too that we can work on. I think we would like to get into the real effects, but it's very hard. So we're kind of focusing currently on ideas where we have data available that we can analyze.
And we call this research because you start out in one place, and as you get into it, you think about other things you could be doing or turn it in a different direction. And that's why conversations like this with your questions from the group are very helpful to us, because they plant seeds. And then as we come up with roadblocks one way or something, say, well, wait a second, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that, or come up with a new idea. So thank you all very much for that. We appreciate it.
Sure. Well, and I'll share quickly that, here we're in very early stages of our community in the US, but we're trying to come up with some basic categories of reports, because there's such variation in how US companies are beginning this journey. So I hope we can keep the conversation going. And I know Elizabeth has been doing some great work with her students at Arizona State, where they're actually looking at reports and
oh, great,
trying to make sense of them. So
maybe Elizabeth can start doing some quality, get her students to do some quality measures the rest of us can use.
Yeah, I hope we get to that. Yeah, that's I think what we would love to get to. So, well, good. Well, thank you so much, Bob. I don't know if you have any last words to say, or.
No, I just wanted to thank both Mary and Elmer so much. I think we're out of time, so I'll have to hold this next time. I wanted to ask Mary about the IASB's management commentary project, since she was actually at the IASB, and one idea, and I think they're going to be looking at multi-capitalism as a big probably construct of that potentially. And one idea I have as that project progresses is maybe it's into the SEC that it's been 15 years since they've updated the guidance on management discussion analysis, and maybe that's a real sweet spot in integrated reporting, but I think we're out of time. So maybe that's a discussion for another time of Mary's thoughts on the voluntary IASB management commentary project.
Yeah, Mary, do you want it? It's a soft.
No, I think I'll leave that for another time. That
okay.
just opened a great big door, so I don't think I'm going to walk through it right now.
You're not going to go through. That's fair. I'll just mention to everybody that our next program is on November 14th, same time, 2 o'clock Eastern in the afternoon, and our guest is Jamal. I'm forgetting his last name, from Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola takes the approach of doing a short summary report, but it's definitely integrated and talks about on the very first page how they what drives their value creation. So another perspective on practice in the US, and November 14th, I hope you can join us. And thank you so much to Mary Barth of Stanford and Elmar Venter of University of Pretoria.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for joining us. Hope to see you next month.